Hi, my name is Maverick Evans. This is the Fall Book Club, and today we are going to be talking about let me get the based on a true story by Norm Macdonald. So here's a better photo of the book cover as it was printed on hardback and paper copy. So I just finished this last night, and it's a pretty brief read, not too hard, just over 300 pages or so, I believe, and it's really fun to read. So the reason that I'm even reading this is, as many people may know, that Norm Macdonald, a comedian who's best known for all of his SNL appearances, and characters and whatnot, and his affiliation with Adam Sandler and Chris Farley and David Spade, the whole gang. He unfortunately passed away just a couple of weeks ago on September 14th of this year, 2021. And so Norm has always been like one of the best comedians ever. He's usually been favored more among his fellow comedians as being funny, and a lot of his humor has been lost on, the common guy, even though that's kind of the crowd that he appealed to the most in a lot of ways, given the place that he was born and raised in, rural Canada. And anyway, he's just a comedian that I enjoyed thoroughly. And as a young person, I'm only 23. Norm was, I believe, 71 the day that he died, which isn't too bad an age, but it's surely a lot younger than everyone who cared about him would have preferred him leave this earth. But about 4 years ago, I stumbled upon him somehow because, television isn't really a big deal with my generation, and so I don't really watch television, and I haven't watched TV, like programming, cable or anything like that, in a really long time. And that's obviously where SNL was, and that was between 90 and 94, I think, during the 3 years that he was doing Weekend Update, which, by the way, is hilarious. It's sad that I don't get a lot of the jokes for the pop culture and the current politics at the time, but a lot of the things I do know about, and still even, it's really funny. So Norm is a great guy. He made a large impression on me about 4 years ago when I found him and just binge watched all of his stand-up and all of his SNL and everything. And, my obsession with him kind of curbed after a while. And then, of course, the news headline came up saying that he had passed away. And, like with every comedian and with every famous person who passes away and dies eventually, you didn't give them their attention that they needed, or that, you didn't even know how much they meant to you and, your life until they go away, which is the case with everyone, even loved ones, friends, performers that you admire. And then, inevitably when they die and you learn about it, you're going to be like, I'm going to give them all the attention that you probably should have gave them while they were alive. So just remember that every time that you get a famous person's, obituary posted to social media, maybe you should take that as a cue and reminder to, give a little bit more attention and time to those people who contribute positively to your life. And so that's what I'm doing here. I've just decided to dive back into Norm Macdonald's career via YouTube mostly, and his book, based on a true story, a memoir. Now, it's a book that, to me, if I hadn't spent pretty much the last 4 years keeping up with old Conan O'Brien appearances on late night, his relationship with David Letterman, his stand-up comedy and the jokes that he tends to tell during his routines. If I hadn't kept up with all of that, and the stories, and of course he goes on to all kinds of different talk shows, and sometimes more intimate ones like Howard Stern, long form discussions. And if I hadn't listened to all of those things, and I still probably haven't even seen it all, although I've listened to quite a bit of it, the book wouldn't make as much sense. I especially feel that the book was written. He says that it was written to be read. And to be enjoyed, and he does maintain that it's a funny book, and it is a funny book. It's a very funny book, and even if you don't know him and all the history and all of the inside jokes, which by the way it's riddled with, you'll still enjoy the book. I think undoubtedly it would help if you knew Norm's voice and you knew his humor. It'll definitely help you out reading it, and the humor will get across that much easier because you'll have his voice, going off in your head as you read it, which comes across very nicely. One of the confusions that I felt kind of could have cropped up for you, whether you read it or you read half of it or part of it, is the fact that the book is ghost written. So the book is not actually ghost written. There were quite a few people I saw on different Reddit forums and things like that they may have been trolls and getting really meta, but it seemed to me that they were properly convinced that the book was ghost written, and they were very meanly, rudely, crudely critiquing him for not being able to write his own book. Norm wrote this book, and the presence of the supposed ghostwriter that's presented in the book, Keen, is just a part of the way that he told the story. So, which brings me to the format of the book. A lot of people compare it to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, just because the adventurous aspect and the different wacky things and the drug use all throughout it is very reminiscent of Fear and Loathing. And undoubtedly, Norm Macdonald was a very well-read person, and so you can kind of see all of these kind of legendary literary figures making a pretty noticeable impression on Norm, and it makes the writing and the story all that much better, really. Norm was a big fan of Russian literature, he says, from a boy, and he was very fond of Fyodor Dostoevsky, which I too am a big fan of, and I would like to do some more Dostoevsky books on this channel, talk about them. And you can definitely tell that has that kind of stories that he told made an impression on him. So what did I think of the book? I think it was great. I think that the book was very fun. I think that it was a great way to reconnect with an artist that is lost now. He remains, in our hearts and in our minds, and I think that the ripples that he left with his comedy career and whatnot will continue to, reach out and affect people in ways that we won't even be able to tell. But it was a book that is very funny, obviously, but then at times too there were ways that Norm would sneak up on you. Definitely in certain chapters are funnier than others. Some are darker than others. And that was part of what I really valued about the book, was that it had a very good balance to it. Was that there were, the entire book wasn't just some spoofy story, but instead it had some very heavy tones. And the reason for that too is that Norm intended this book not to be a series of facts that he, wanted to convey about his life. It wasn't an actual memoir. It's a series of truths, as he would put it. And this, I think we can talk about too, is a good subject for the thing, is that there's differences between reality and hyperreality. Beauregard wrote quite a bit about this subject, hyperreality. So what is hyperreality? What is reality? So reality would probably be just material being, material substance, and factual knowledge, right? And so that's, the fact that there are things in the world and this is how the physics of it works, and, whatever it is. And you can, write down a series of facts about an individual and the things that occurred in their life, but you wouldn't be able necessarily to convey the truth of that individual's life. And so the reason for that is because there are themes and experiences, interpretations and positions that may have been taken or experienced or developed throughout that individual's life. And without those parts of the person's story, the facts are incorrect. They're not true, right? Because the way that I perceive the facts is completely detached from the way that that individual perceived the facts and how they, interacted with them. So, I guess, well, let me see, hyper reality. So let's say this is the way that Jordan Peterson explains hyper reality, as far as I can tell, is that, to use one of his phrases, is that there is a static of historic facts that occur, right? And so say we're going to, there will be a series of events, heroic individuals, real heroic individuals that existed in history, and they will act out in their life a static of events. And onlookers will witness these things, and then they will extract from all of those events the most heroic individuals and the most heroic things that they did. And then when they extract all of them out of that static line, then they'll conglomerate them, synthesize them, and then, we'll get things like Beowulf. A very concise example of the hero archetype. And so that's it. That's basically what hyperreality is. And when that happens, when all of these facts get put together, we then have something that is realer than reality. It's more true than reality. It's more true than history. And because it conveys a deeper, overarching truth. And so that was Norm's goal with this book, and I believe that he achieved that goal quite flawlessly, in my opinion. Of course, you would have had to keep up with the guy in order to know or surmise, or because you kind of have to dig through a lot of this stuff to try and determine what is factual and what is true, despite not being factual. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the book. If you want to get to know Norm, I would say you could read the book, and that's how you would, come to know his truth. And, that's not like, I'm saying my truth. It's just how would you convey Norm's life, and what was the experience like? What was the meaning of his life? What were some of the things that he grappled with? And none of these things are spoon-fed to the reader by any means. On the contrary, rather, he is very nuanced in his way of conveying this information, these deep truths. You have to, read between the lines. And I would say most of this book is between the lines and not on it. And so, in that way, it is quite an intellectual book, albeit presented in an extremely simplistic manner. He says in several interviews that he, is not a smart man, or, isn't interested in intellectual academic jargon. And so he chooses to use a more simplistic vocabulary in the book, and a more simplistic approach in his literary style, and that, in my opinion, makes the book all the better and more intellectual as far as I'm concerned, because he was able to use, the least words possible and the most simplistic form of communication in order to convey deep, intimate truths, and that is really the goal of any writer, in my opinion, is that you don't want to be using superfluous language when you really could just be using more simplistic language so everybody could understand it. The more what is it? Maybe it's Occam's razor, right? It's that the simplest answer is oftentimes the best answer, or the truest answer. Best and true, I'm sure, two important distinctions to be made between those two. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I thought about Norm's book, and he's going to be deeply missed, as he has been by many of his friends. And golly, telling from all of the videos that I've watched from him, I'm sure he was a terrific guy, a very good friend, and I'm glad that I didn't know him better, because this loss would hurt all the more. Although I do wish that I could have known him, as many people do, I'm sure, wish that they could have known him, because he's a very genuine, authentic guy. And so, if you have a chance, go take a look at some of his stand-up. Go take a look at his late-night appearances. Those are always really funny. And watch some of his show, and then read his book. It wouldn't take you very long, maybe a week of casual reading, and you'll have it down. So that's what I think about Norm Macdonald's based on a true story, a memoir. And thanks for joining me for the Fall Book Club. My name's Maverick Evans, and I'll see you later.